Amid growing suspicions in the United States of Chinese scientists and students, a community of Chinese-American scientists is now pushing back. 3 prominent scientific organizations recently published a letter expressing concern that American rhetoric and policies may lead to the racial profiling of Chinese academics. They say it has spawned fear and frustration, which may undermine their research and harm science. The group wrote, quote, "The vast majority of scientists and students of Chinese descent are law-abiding citizens, residents, or visitors." In response, the National Institutes of Health acknowledged instances of prejudicial actions, but it also reiterated its warning last year that some foreign governments are trying to influence scientific research in the U.S., and several researchers have failed to disclose receiving financial support from foreign entities. But the NIH director says the concerns apply to all foreign scientists, not just those of Chinese descent. So how serious are these allegations? Could they actually harm research? Let's get to the discussion. Joining me now is Han Hua, a fellow at the Chongyang Institute of Renmin University, and from New York, Ian Reifowitz, professor of historical studies at S.U.N.Y Empire State College. It's great to have you both with us today. So, Professor, let me start with you there in New York. These are serious accusations here. The U.S. government basically saying that Chinese researchers, Chinese students are working as spies. Your take?
Well, the U.S. government here is trying to walk a very fine line. There's a lot to unpack here. There are more students from China in the United States studying than there are from any other country, because China is one of the 2 largest countries in the world, and they send a lot of students here, particularly to study in the so-called STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So just certainly, based on a numbers game, there are a lot of people here coming from China. The U.S. government has seen evidence of students from China being recruited by the Chinese government, but that's also been the case with students from other governments as well. So they want to call attention to the issue, but they also have to avoid doing it in a way that really unfairly singles out these students, because both the scientists and the United States government officials have gone on record as saying the vast majority of these students are not spies. They're here for legitimate purposes to study. So it's a matter of calling attention to something without really creating this climate of fear and racial profiling, which I think the scientists are right to be concerned about, because it can go so far that students are really treated unfairly. It's a difficult line that they have to walk here.
Yeah, it is a tricky balance. So, Ms. Han, let me bring you in here. Do you worry about a backlash against Chinese researchers, students working in the United States?
Of course I do. From the letter, you can read that the scientists representing by these 3 major associations in the United States, Chinese American scientists, they are really concerned because they are the frontline scientists in the labs, all the faculties and students in the universities. Without any concerns, they would not write such a letter to these to NIH. So I think there's really serious concerns from the scientists, the Chinese American scientists, about this concern.
But what about the concerns from the United States that, foreign governments, mainly China, has been singled out by U.S. leaders, is basically stealing secrets? Do you think that that is truly a big concern and a big threat?
Yes, there is no clear accusation from this letter and their response about the accusation. But we can see that led by some politicians in the D.C., that led by Mr. Miller and probably his boss, saying that or accused the Chinese scientists living and studying in the United States for being as spies. But we need to find the real evidence. So far, there is no evidence at all about this kind of accusations. And I want to point it out that in the past, there might be, or there were some accusations against the Chinese American scientists, but all the cases were either dropped out or, resolved with the devastating career for those Chinese American scientists. I don't want this to be happening again.
Professor, do you agree with that, especially because I think the United States and the FBI would say there is evidence that the Chinese government has been encouraging some of this activity? The FBI director told Senate leaders recently that its professors, scientists, students, that they are seeing it in almost every field office, that the FBI has around the country. It's not just in major cities, it's in small ones as well. So how pervasive do you worry this might be?
Well, it is a real concern. I mean, I think there was a book recently written by a man named Daniel Golden called Spy Schools, and he laid out the facts and the evidence that there have been instances of Chinese government officials recruiting Chinese students being sent to the United States. Likewise, the United States government engages in similar tactics in other countries. This is something that governments do around the world. So to suggest that neither side is doing this, or that only one side is doing this, it would be wrong. But yes, there are cases. There was a case recently, and my Chinese pronunciation, I'm going to apologize, is not great, but the gentleman's name, I believe, is Shi Chao-kun, who is an electrical engineering student in Chicago, who was indicted, and the case is still moving, and there's evidence of emails back and forth. And like I said, this happens in the other direction, too. The United States tries to get its own people to spy in other countries. There's no question about this. So to suggest it doesn't happen is incorrect. The question is, are people being targeted unfairly? Are people being racially profiled? And that's really dangerous. And that's where I think the letter from these,
and do you think they are?
Chinese-American scientists are so important.
And Professor, do you think they are?
Look, right. You know, you'd have to review every single case to know. I really don't know whether people are being targeted unfairly. I think each case, you know, hopefully will go before a jury, and a jury, you know, it's a high standard, a high bar to get a jury to issue a conviction. So one would hope that each person is treated unfairly. We do have some harsh rhetoric coming from the United States government under this president about China. My hope is that that kind of harsh rhetoric doesn't unfairly bias people, you know, who might be sitting on a jury. We'll have to keep a very careful eye on that.
I mean, Ms. Han, as you know, are well aware that the United States relies on academics from all over the world to help push through incredible breakthroughs and discoveries, especially from China. So do you worry that this might stifle research?
Yes, I do, because in the response letter by NIH, it mentions that one critical successful factor for the joint collaboration between United States and other countries, including China, is the joint collaborations between the scientists, all of the, not only between US and China, but from all over the world. So this kind of issues or this acquisitions might pose a long-term threat towards the so-called naive or pure scientific research environment under the background of this macro climate between the tensions between United States and China.
I mean, we heard from the scientific organizations composed of Chinese Americans there in the United States, but do you think the Chinese government, Ms. Han, might respond to this?
The Chinese government, I think, in my opinion, the Chinese government can do through more communications, just like the three associations do, by writing a letter to, you know, to open letter or through some open channels to ensure the fairness and transparent collaboration between the two countries, especially in the scientific field, because the scientific joint research is critical to both countries. So either the Chinese, the 1,000 talents recruiting plan needs to be more open or fair, and through more communication towards the not only U.S. but towards the world, and vice versa.
You know, Professor, there's obviously a lot of mistrust here, I think, coming from both sides, both from China and the United States. What do you think needs to happen to try to rebuild some of this trust, especially within the academic community?
Well, I think my colleague here made an excellent point about transparency. Certainly the 1,000 Talents program can be made more transparent. You know, there is a difference between the students coming to the United States. I believe China sends about 350,000 students each year to the United States. The number of American students studying in China is much smaller. So the two sides need to get, if they want to reduce tensions, and there's a good question about whether that's really the goal, you know, in terms of a power competition, that they want to reduce tensions. But I would argue that they should try to reduce tensions, that the goal of achieving scientific breakthroughs is something that's of paramount importance. And so, as my colleague said, if you could get to a place of greater transparency where, you know, the two sides can talk about the 1,000 Talents program and can come to some agreements about what is permitted and what is not permitted, I think that that really might help. And the United States, on its part, can also be more transparent about the way it examines or investigates, Chinese American students or any student for that matter.
I mean, Professor, how concerned are you that this might escalate? Where do we go from here? Especially because there are fears that there could be limits on student visas for Chinese students. What could happen next?
Well, my hope would be that this could be something that's negotiated in a bilateral way. I really, I don't like to predict the future. I don't think it's not something that I can really say with any kind of certainty. There is spying. There's no question that there is some spying among, these students, just as there is from other countries. And so, to some degree, you're going to have to get to a place either where the two sides agree to not use students to spy, or the tension is going to continue to escalate. But perhaps if you could get some kind of agreement and you could rebuild some kind of trust, you'd get to a more positive place. If the spying goes on, and again it goes on in both directions, I think you're going to just see continued mistrust. And I hope, and I agree with my fellow panelists, that science does not suffer.
And Ms. Han, I know that's a big concern of yours, that science will suffer here. What is the biggest concern revolving that?
I think if let's continue to talk about some predictions of the future. If there is spying, then we need proof and evidence. This is the essence of the scientific research, first thing first. And also, on the positive side, if we can put forward some positive proposals towards these tensions and the current concerns. Let me put it this way. In the past 20 or even longer years, China and U.S. have been going through ups and downs with the debate on whether U.S. should be containing China or engaging China. And there is no conclusion. So I would say there might be difficult, or there wouldn't be any conclusion towards this kind of concerns raised by Chinese American scientists on both sides, not only by China but also by U.S. because U.S. with its power and development, economic and social and societal development, it relies on the joint efforts by the world contributors. So I think with the macro climate change, that both sides need to work not only literal on the climate change, but also spiritually to work effective measures like to ease the tensions and concerns raised by some technical problems, for example, like the visa extension or some other technical issues, to create a more feasible working environment for the two scientists to work together.
Okay, we will leave it there. I want to thank both our guests here, Han Hua, fellow at Chongyang Institute at Renmin University, and joining us from New York, Professor Ian Reifowitz, Professor of History at S.U.N.Y Empire State College. Thank you both for your time today, an interesting conversation. Well, that will do it for this edition of The Point. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the CGTN app to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and search for The Point. Thank you so much for watching. We think you've got The Point.